Hi, Grant. Thanks for coming out on a beautiful daytime, to sit in the dark for over 2 hours and watch this nearly 50-year-old movie. I'm not going to say too much now because we'll talk after the movie, but yeah, Jeff mentioned that Stanley would have been 98 today, which is really incredible. I wouldn't say he died young, but he did die far too young. I think he was only 69, maybe he had turned 70, I don't remember, but he was just finishing up Eyes Wide Shut when he unfortunately passed away. I'm sure he had no idea when he was making The Shining that he only had 2 more movies in him after that one. When he made The Shining, he was kind of sorely in need of a commercial hit. He was coming off of Barry Lyndon, which did pretty poorly at the box office, and you know, Stanley's films never did well with the critics when they first opened, and you know, Barry Lyndon was that way, and The Shining was no different. When he decided to make The Shining, he was driven first and foremost by the fact that he wanted to hit, because he worked in a very particular, deliberate way, and he wanted to continue working that way. But he also knew that the only way he could continue working that way is if his movies made money. And so it was part of why he cast Jack Nicholson in the role. He went with a Stephen King novel. Stephen King was really kind of up and coming at that moment. And he kind of threw his weight behind making what he hoped would be the scariest movie ever made. He often talked to his wife, Christiana, about wanting to make the scariest movie ever made. I don't know that The Shining is that. I don't know if there is a scariest movie ever made. I guess for each of us, maybe there is. But the film came out, and it did not do well with the critics at all. It did okay financially, but Stanley decided to take the opportunity to fiddle with the movie, and he ended up cutting 25 minutes out of the film and created a version of the film for the European market. And that's actually the version of the movie that I did a new commentary for on the Criterion disc. It's going to be the very first time that the international version of the film is going to be available for people in the US to see. Anyway, I'm rambling a bit here. We're going to talk a lot after the film. I hope you enjoy the film as much as I do. I first saw this film when I was 12 years old. The summer it came out. I saw it at a shopping mall in suburban Cleveland, Ohio. And I had no idea at that moment that it was going to be the beginning of what has been a nearly 50-year obsession with the film. We can talk more about that afterwards, but I'm glad I was able to do something constructive with my obsession in the form of this book, which I'm very proud of, and I hope if you're interested in the film and interested in Kubrick, you'll take a chance to give a read. Anyway, that's it for now. We'll talk more afterwards, and enjoy The Shining.
The last Nicholson with the head shot, wasn't that cut too? There was something like some special effects of some things were supposed to crawl out of his head. I thought I read somewhere in some place. I don't know if that's true or...
That was a story that I think Stephen King told. That's the only reference I've ever seen to that, about a moment like that he saw like a dummy head of Jack Nicholson that was going to have like worms coming out of it or something. I don't think it's true. I think he was misremembering. I think he saw a makeup test for the woman in room 237. Because nothing like that was ever shot. I had access to all of the daily production reports and everything that was shot. But yeah, that's what I'm guessing that was all about. You know, interestingly, that last shot of Jack in the photo, Stanley's original intention was that at the very end of the movie, the camera would be in the Colorado Lounge, which is the big lounge where Jack sits and types, and that the camera would move up to the table and find on the table the scrapbook. There's a scrapbook that was a big part of Stephen King's novel, and Stanley shot that scrapbook a lot. There were many scenes having to do with that scrapbook and Jack becoming obsessed with it that he cut out and didn't use. But at the end of the film, he was going to move in on the scrapbook and find that photo with Jack in it in the scrapbook. And then a hand, I think Grady's hand, would shut the book and take it away, and that was going to be the end of the movie. But what happened was, after Jack Nicholson had wrapped off the film and they were filming everything that was left, one night there was a massive fire at Elstree Studios on the soundstage that held the Colorado Lounge. It burned to the ground, just gone. And luckily they had already filmed everything they needed in there except for that one shot. So Stanley had to kind of rethink how he was going to do that moment, and that's what led to it just being on the wall with the long, slow pushing.
Yeah, and one of the great things about the book is also you get to learn about the person who's made the actual image and superimposed the shot of Jack on the photograph, and how long it took her, and how many drafts they went through, and all of that. That kind
for
of
one
detail.
little moment at the end of the film. She was on the set for months working on it. And here's an interesting story. Her name is Joan Honor Smith. I would track down people who were on the crew. Most of them were in England. And so to interview them, I often had to get up first thing on Saturday morning, because I was busy making movies during the week, but I would call them Saturday morning, which was late afternoon in England, and I would do these interviews. And I remember when I interviewed Joan, I said to my family, "Oh, don't worry, this is going to be a quickie." Like, I couldn't, like, how much could she possibly have to say about airbrushing Jack into the photo? Well, it turns out, Joan was actually on the set for a few months while they were filming. But she also was one of two people I interviewed on the show who truly had a photographic memory. I mean, she could tell me down to the moment, like, what she ate on a given day when she was on the set. And so she had lots of stories to tell. She hung out with Shelley Duvall a lot between takes, and so she ended up being one of many really rich sources of stories.
Incredible. Okay. Let's go over there.
You know, I've thought a lot about that. You know, if I ever could have had a chance to talk to Stanley Kubrick. I actually had a dream once that I got to meet him. And I remember in this dream, I said I never wanted to ask you if you'd ever seen any of my movies at Pixar, because I was worried that maybe you wouldn't like them. And he said, well, there's always that chance. Just my dream. I don't know, there's still, you know, Stanley left a few mysteries behind. Even though I extensively researched this book and tried to make it the definitive accounting of the making of the film, there's still some things I don't have answers to that I'm curious about. One of them is the character of Grady. At the beginning of the movie, he's referred to as Charles Grady. And then when Jack actually meets him in the bathroom, he introduces himself as Delbert Grady. And why? I don't know. Is it just meant to be just unsettling? I don't know, and I'll never know. Because I've talked to Diane Johnson, who wrote the screenplay with Stanley, and she has no recollection of them talking about it. So there are a few little things like that, but I like that. I don't want to know everything. So, I mean, he was playful about it. He didn't. One of the biggest things, people ask me, like, the biggest thing I learned or uncovered in the making of this book, and I thought about it a lot. My answer is really that it really humanized Stanley Kubrick for me. I had put Stanley up on such a pedestal as being a cinema god, and he was, but he was a guy, he was a person, and he was often filled with insecurities, and he could be anxious. He didn't always have all the answers. He asked a lot of questions on his set. He wasn't afraid of getting an idea from anybody. On The Shining, he didn't even know how he was going to end the film until he was well into production, and that was the same on Full Metal Jacket. Scatman Crothers shot all of his scenes at the beginning of the film when the family first gets there, and then Stanley let him go, and he went back to Los Angeles for half a year, and he spent all that time thinking, oh, I need to get back and shoot my scenes where I come and save Wendy and Danny, which is what happens in the book, only to be told when he showed up, no, you're going to get murdered with an axe. My point is just that Stanley, people think that Stanley just conceived these films to the tiniest degree and then executed them, and that just really wasn't his process. He fished around and was trying to make the most interesting film that he could in the amount of time that he had, and didn't have all the answers. I saw evidence of him struggling and having a hard time figuring things out. And I, as a filmmaker myself, I go through that all the time, and I think, well, must be something wrong with me. I'm not up to snuff. I can't be like a Stanley Kubrick who could just birth these things into the world. But no, he actually did struggle.
Did
The
it work?
one elevator to the right is on 12, and I believe the other one's on 11. And then my other question was when I wanted to know about that, if there was any significance. And then the next question is when Jack is in the storage room and then Grady comes to get him out, he starts to get up, and I noticed it's Libby and Del Monte and all these things. But the vanilla wafers, it just sticks with me. The vanilla wafer is upside down, and then there's another vanilla wafer that's right side up. I don't know if that has a significance or
Yeah,
is that
I would say probably not. Yeah. But again, Stanley did play with numbers in the movie. There's stuff in the movie that is all about him having fun with numbers, and I have his notes where he's doing it on screenplay pages. But in both of those cases, I don't know anything about how the elevators were set. I will say, interestingly, Stanley hit a point while he was making the film where he started to panic and worried that the movie didn't have blood in it. There was only one person who died while he was making it till he figured out the ending, and it was Jack, who had this kind of cold, bloodless death. And so it wasn't until very late in the process that Stanley did a few things. He decided to have Scatman Crothers' character, Halloran, get killed with the axe. He brought Lisa and Louise, the Grady twins, back to shoot that shot of them chopped up in the hallway that originally wasn't supposed to be there. It was just supposed to be them in the hallway. So he did these kind of last-minute things to get more blood in the film, and that included the elevators. That was one of the very, very last things that were shot after all the actors were gone from the set. They set up and rigged. It was a very elaborate setup with multiple cameras to shoot the blood. And then interestingly, he ended up using that image in the movie's teaser trailer. So that was everyone's introduction to this Kubrick film that was coming, was this like ghastly, ominous image of blood pouring from elevators, unlike anything anyone had ever seen before.
One of the all-time best trailers.
Yep.
That great Wendy Carlos and Rachel Elkind music.
That was another piece. One last thing. Listen, my book's like 900 pages long, so I'm only going to talk about so much. But Stanley had worked with Wendy Carlos first on A Clockwork Orange, doing electronic music for that, and he reached out to her when he was preparing The Shining, and he asked her to write some music. But he didn't show her any footage. He just sent her a copy of Stephen King's book and said, read this and write a score for this. And she did. She wrote a ton of music. Stanley ended up rejecting most of it. She later, many decades later, put it out herself on CD. You can find it. It's not great. But the music that is great, he actually used, which is the whole title sequence, the music when the family's driving up to the hotel, and then some of the stuff like when Jack is going into room 237 and there's a heartbeat and kind of lots of strange sounds. That was all stuff that Wendy had written for that. But like on many of his films, he ended up using a lot of needle drop classical music for the score.
For sure. Okay.